Missy, should we do our little intro?
We should.
It takes us about 8 tries, so just stand by, Amy.
Hi, this is Missy.
Hi, this is Elizabeth, and welcome to You Should Meet My Friend. Today we are meeting my good friend, Amy Ryder. We go way back to when our kids were in diapers and we were stationed in Germany. And she has always been someone you can call when your house is burning down, and she will show up and help you through things. This is a very unconventional introduction. She also has the best description ever of my husband, and that is that he is process intolerant, which tells you everything you need to know about Greg Auld. The Ryders and the Alds have been in and out of each other's lives for, gosh, it was when Michael was first born, so that makes it 22 years. And there are many reasons that make Amy a fabulous person for our audience to meet. There are many fabulous reasons why you should know Amy, but the reason I really wanted to talk to her was to talk about a time in her life where she lost a close friend and how that has evolved, my perception, but obviously we'll talk about this more, how that has evolved into her current job working for the organization known as No Greater Sacrifice. Welcome to the podcast, Amy.
Thank you so much. I seriously have been thrilled since you invited me. I feel so interesting to be invited to speak on a podcast. I can't even tell you like how it just brings a smile on my face. So thanks.
Oh, good. Good. And that's our mission, is to convince people that every single human actually is very interesting, even if they don't believe that about themselves. I should have looked up the year this happened, but I was working at Andrews Air Force Base and you called me and you said that a friend of yours had been lost in combat and that you were leading the group of people that were organizing the ceremony at Arlington Cemetery. And because of the job I had at the time, you said, hey, a bunch of his buddies are coming in, flying in from Luke Air Force Base because they're going to be doing the flyover. And there was some permissions and some stuff needed so that they could park at Andrews Air Force Base. And so that was how you let me know what was going on. The person was Troy Gilbert. So tell us how you met Troy and Ginger Gilbert and how your friendship started.
So I joined the Air Force in ROTC. I went to Penn State and then had a couple assignments, very couple, like just 2, 3 assignments, and then ended up in Turkey in 94, 95, where I met my husband, Pat. He's now my husband. At the time, he was going to England, and I was going back to DC to get my master's. And so I may have stretched the truth a little bit with my assignments officer to tell him that we were engaged. We weren't yet engaged, but could they please assign me to England because that's where my soon to be husband would go. Well, of course, thankfully, he asked me to marry him. We went to England. He got there before me. He went to Lakenheath Air Force Base, which is about an hour and a half north of London. My assignment was at Molesworth, which was about 45 minutes west of where he was. By the time I showed up, he'd already made friends with this guy, Troy Gilbert, and he was telling me, met this other guy that was working protocol at the time. Pat was ready to pin on captain, and he was hoping to just show up wearing his captain's rank. But his friend Troy was like, nope, we're going to do a ceremony for you. And so he put it together. Turned out the wing commander at Lakenheath had been my group commander in Turkey. So when I walked in, it turned into kind of a thing about me, where the wing commander, Colonel Richardson, called his wife, like, Buns, that was her call sign, bring the champagne, come over and let's celebrate. Amy's here. I'm like, this is about my husband, right? But the cool thing about the friendship between Troy and Pat was that, one, Troy decided that Pat could not just show up and put his rank on, that there needed to be a celebration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And two, how often is it, not to be stereotypical, but usually it's the women that make friends and then they bring the boys into the relationship. But this was exactly the opposite, where the boys made friends and then brought the women into the relationship and we became fast friends. And so we hung out together for not even a year, to be honest. So they had, Troy and Ginger had been married for a few years. Pat and I had just gotten married. We hung out a lot. They would bring their two dogs, Sterling and Brody, over to our house, which was just probably 15 minutes from them. But they would stay for the whole weekend, and we just enjoyed each other's company so much that when the previous wing commander at Lakenheath was mentoring Troy, knew that he wanted not to be a protocol officer. He really wanted to be a pilot. So when this general we pinned on general, he went to run the Air Force Academy. He invited Troy to come out and be a protocol officer there as a vehicle to launch him into his pilot career. They left earlier than what we were hoping. I was at SOS, and Ginger and Troy, already pregnant with their first child, ended up PCSing to Colorado Springs. And from there, then Troy went into pilot training and became a pilot. So over the next bunch of years, we honestly, I don't think went a year without seeing the two couples getting together. Honestly, they
awesome.
went to Colorado. We went to see them there. They went from there to, Italy they went from there to pilot training at Shepherd Air Force Base. So Pat and I went to his graduation. His first as a pilot was in Phoenix. And while they were in Phoenix, Pat's sister got married in Southern California, which was a pretty easy drive from Phoenix. And that's the last time that we saw Troy. Honestly, we met at Coronado at the Marine base and naval base that was there. They had some accommodations right on the ocean. We got a queue room and stayed there with them, and our kids were super little at the time. So that's how we met.
Then were they stationed in Phoenix when he was deployed?
Yes. So after that, actually, we went to Germany. They came to Italy. That was his first assignment, and in the F-16, where he was a new pilot flying that aircraft. We saw each other a couple times. They came to Germany to see us. We spent Thanksgiving in Turkey, and then they went to their next assignment, which was at the training base, the F-16 training base at Loop, which is right outside of Phoenix. I'm assuming you want me to go into the story about Troy's crash and what happened.
Sure. I guess I'm most curious for how you're not a direct family member, but the Air Force feels like a family. Like what was the evolution of learning about it, I guess, is my question.
And we had met parents through when we went to his graduation from pilot training. We met his parents. He and Pat went on a camping trip together, stayed at his parents' house. So we knew his parents. We also had gotten to know Ginger's parents when they came to see Troy and Ginger when they were in England with us. And I think we saw them again, probably at his graduation from pilot training. And it seems to me maybe another time we knew the extended family. It was right after Thanksgiving 6. My boys were, I think, 4 and 5 at the time. I was waiting outside for Christian to come home from preschool on the bus. And I got a call from Ginger's mom, Juju, where she said that he had crashed. He was doing close air support. She didn't have a lot of information at the time, but I've learned since then that this was in 2006, where combat was pretty fast and furious and heavy and just tragically intense all over Iraq. But especially around Baghdad and just north of Baghdad, there was an area that was called Taji. So there was an observation helicopter that had crashed. It was called a Little Bird, an OB-1 pilot, and the aircraft didn't have much support around it. And so Troy and his wingmen were on their way back to their base in Balad, where they had been, where they were deployed to. They heard that there was this aircraft that needed some support, and then Troy just broke from the tanker and went to provide whatever support was needed. At the time, he didn't know what that necessarily would entail. But between the time that he left the tanker and he arrived in Taji, which is probably a, 15-minute flight, something like that, It was obvious that the pilot of the Little Bird was being overrun by some insurgents who were near the area, but they were getting closer to attack them. Also, at the same time, a Delta Force unit that was in the area that had been mobilized to come support this pilot. Not only was the pilot in danger, but also the Delta Force was also in danger. Troy came in with his F-16 without a whole lot of experience, to be honest. And he did an initial strafing run, which is where he used his Gatling gun. He went super low so that he was able to tell the good guy from the bad guy. He was trying to do close air support to try to get the Iraqi insurgents to back off. But of course, he didn't want to inadvertently conduct any fratricide against the American forces. And so he flew really low. So he did a successful pass, super low. In fact, the parameters that were probably safe. He circled back around and he came in for another strafing run because he just didn't feel like he had accomplished the mission the first time. On his second run, he was way too low. His tail hit the ground and he tumbled. His aircraft tumbled about a mile. When he landed, all indications are that he had already passed away. The Iraqi insurgents swarmed the F-16. His canopy had already popped loose at the time. They pulled him out of the jet, rolled him in a carpet, threw him in the back of a plane, and we've heard since, not only from the accident investigation, but also from some other sources that were watching this unfold through unmanned aerial vehicles at the time, that our forces came in and just tried to blow the crap out of this convoy that was speeding away with Troy Gilbert's body in the back. Time we didn't know if he was living or dead. And so back up to then when Juju called me and she said, look, there's been an accident at this time on the 27th of November. We didn't know if the body that they had rolled up in the carpet was alive or dead, right?
Oh, wow.
And I remember Juju saying, we don't yet know. We're praying that, of course, the outcome is not what we think that it's going to be. Do you want to talk to Ginger? Here's where I learned one of the biggest lessons I think that I have taken forward and hopefully imparted on other people. Juju then asked me, do you want to talk to Ginger? And I just had collapsed. My knees would not hold me upright anymore. And I collapsed on my driveway. And I'm like, I will call back when I can hold myself together. I've realized since then that the words didn't matter. It didn't matter if I could hold myself together. It didn't matter if I had anything articulate to say. If we were just on the phone together and she could feel my presence, I learned in that moment, you just show up. When the unimaginable happens, to whomever it is in your life, you just show up. If you don't know what that looks like, you just show up. And it becomes obvious. And what reinforced that, honestly, was you, my friend Elizabeth, when honestly, like it wasn't very long later when, of course, I called Ginger back and then we had conversations and there was a ceremony that once they had concluded that the bone fragments that they had pulled from the cockpit from that Troy was in fact dead and that the body that the insurgents had took away was not, he passed away. So they had a ceremony for him out in Phoenix. And then Ginger had asked me and a couple other friends to put together the ceremony, the burial ceremony at Arlington. And you just showed up, Elizabeth. You and a couple of my other, Allison Brown and my other friend, Trisha, I remember, Trisha Hollett. You guys just showed up in my house. And I think I sent one of you to go get boots for Ginger, and
I remember that.
And someone else just, I don't remember. I think you made phone calls or something, and I was completely about the whole ramp clearance issue at Andrews, and you worked that too, right? Because there was a reserve tanker unit at Phoenix that was co-located with Troy's F-16 training unit, and they just brought people and stuff and families, and you guys just made it happen. And the people that were mobilized just showed up.
Well, I guess from my perspective, it just felt if I could do a teeny weeny thing, which is what it felt like I was doing to help in some way, shape, or form, that of course I was going to do that. I think I remember we were out driving on the airfield. Were you with me? You might have been with me. And we passed my wing commander, and I'm like, I don't think you're technically supposed to be with me in this truck, but hopefully he didn't notice.
I don't even remember that. Honestly, I
I don't
mean,
know.
at night out,
I don't know. Something was going on where we were meeting the air crew, and I don't know if it was you or somebody else. Anyway, it was just humorous. We're like, hopefully he didn't see me just drive by him.
oh, you
Yeah.
just made it happen. And that was so appreciated.
Yeah. It was really impressive the number of people that just came together, and you guys had a little, almost like a little operation center of just trying to coordinate people coming in for the funeral and all the ins and outs. And by this time, Ginger and Troy had how many kids at what ages?
Five.
They had
They had
five
five.
kids.
Boston was 9. Grayson was 7. Bella was, I think, 3. And then the twins, they have twin girls who are 9 months old.
Oh,
And
wow.
fast forward to today, Boston is married with a baby of his own now. And Grayson has been a contractor, actually working as a trainer for Air Force pilots in training. Bella's going to graduate from college, and the twins just started college at Auburn this year. They're all adults now. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I know that you remain close with Ginger and have been from this 2006 on. So, at what point did you learn about the No Greater Sacrifice organization? Was it because of them, or was that something that you knew about and connected them to it?
No, it was totally because of them. Ginger and I, like you said, have remained close, and I've gotten to know some of her besties. One in particular, Amy, and that's who is joining me. We're both en route for now to Nashville because Ginger and her now husband, Jim, have moved again, and we're going to help them unpack boxes. Again, back to the show up. Rewind back to probably, okay, so Troy was killed in 2006. There were a lot of organizations, honestly, for the fallen of military service members who reach out and offer funds and support for a number of different aspects of life after your service member passes away through whatever means,
Hmm.
but especially in combat, right? No Greater Sacrifice was one of them. They had formed in about 2008 was the first year. And so I remember hearing about No Greater Sacrifice, but just filed it away. There were a lot of other things going on at the time. A couple years ago, Boston graduated from college, and now No Greater Sacrifice is an organization that funds scholarships for the children of the fallen and severely wounded service members. And the goal for each one of the scholars is to get their balance down to 0 so that they graduate debt free by the end of their college experience. And the idea is not to just give each scholar a little bit of money, it's to come in after whatever other benefits they are owed, like RISE scholarship, GI Bill, other scholarship organizations, and No Greater Sacrifice will then write a check for the rest of the funds. And not only that, we partner with the entire family. I would say almost half of the scholars really are first generation college students. And this wasn't necessarily the case with Troy and Ginger's kids, but as I've learned since, it is an organization that comes alongside their family and funds all of the kids. So with Ginger's 5 children, they provided funding for all 5. Now, with the children of fallen service members, there are a lot of other benefits that they can tap into. Honestly, the dollar amount wasn't that huge, but the almost like emotional support that is given to these children of service members is something that provides a community for them. And I ended up getting personally involved probably 4 years ago now, after Boston, 3 years ago, maybe, after For Boston had actually been hired by No Greater Sacrifice. They have a teeny tiny staff that administers the scholarships and provides mentorship for the scholars. They hired Boston to add to that mentorship and also provide coaching. Boston at this time was in his mid-20s. They decided, the director, Rebecca LeBourne, had decided a couple years ago that they would add to their services in their program an in-person orientation for the children that are going off to college. I guess not children anymore, they're young adults.
Yeah.
And so this onboarding program was in DC. They need a lot of volunteers to be able to run this couple-day program, which includes some work where they work on bios and resumes and some college prep type things, but also they do some fun activities in DC. And so Boston just called me up and asked me if I'd be willing to volunteer. And of course, I'd already gotten in the habit of just showing up, and I just can't say no to anybody in the Gilbert family that asks me to do it ever. So I'm like, yeah, of course, I can help. And I helped that first year with boot camp. The second year in boot camp, I invited my friend Elizabeth Auld to come help me. Third year, by then I was already employed. So I had, meanwhile, when all of this had been happening, actually when Troy was killed, I was a fairly new contractor. I spent 10 years active duty. All told, I spent 20 years as a contractor. So I was 2 years into being a contractor when Troy was killed. 10, 12, 15, 18, whatever the math is later, I just started craving something else, not necessarily something more meaningful, but just something different. And
Right.
And so after having volunteered a couple years for No Greater Sacrifice, after of course having matured the friendship with the Gilbert, now Ravella family, to the point that I really observed how they serve others and just admired that.
Mm-hmm.
And one morning this March in 2024, I woke up and I saw on LinkedIn that Rebecca had, the executive director of No Greater Sacrifice, had posted a position for a program manager. I didn't even have to think about it. It was like a no-brainer. I popped out of bed. I updated my resume. I texted Boston. I texted Rebecca, and now this is my new gig. So
Awesome.
it's a natural progression.
Yeah. I know it was a trial by fire because you got hired literally before the summer boot camp. Yeah. So you have a couple months under your belt. What do you think? I'm going to assume you have no regrets, but what do you think going from defense contractor to nonprofit work?
Yeah, it really, my nonprofit experience and my observation had been through Ginger and her now husband, Jim. Like they worked for Folds of Honor for a while, and now Jim is the executive vice president. He just got promoted last week at the Gary Sinise Foundation. And I helped Ginger the last couple years. She's gotten involved in a ministry for widows called Never Alone Widows. And I'd helped as our other bestie, Amy, with their widows conference every year for the last 3 years. I feel like that has been an introduction to the nonprofit world that me in. Like it just was so enticing to help other people.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that defense contracting doesn't eventually help people, but this is a very immediate kind of an effect. And it was really cool. And if I have to be honest with myself, when I started thinking about a changing career, I was really hoping that something in the nonprofit world would just materialize. And so that's where, when this job was posted on LinkedIn, it was absolutely a God thing that was like, yep, this is exactly what I need to be doing right now. And I have learned that in a really very small staff I'm now the 5th person on the staff. And we're lean and mean and we're small but mighty. And I have learned that writing contract proposals over the many years that I've been working as a defense contractor for PEP Plus, that writing grant proposals is not all that different, right? If you know how to communicate, you just shift that focus to another objective, right? And so it has not been hard to get adjusted to. I think my heart was already there. And I think the skills that I had attained over when I was in the Air Force, I was in Intel and then I was an Intel defense contractor. And that's all about communication and about researching and
Absolutely.
figuring courses of action and putting in writing what would make sense to someone else if they didn't already have background. And so it's been
Hmm.
a pretty easy transition. And it absolutely helps that I have this emotional tie to the overall mission. But for someone that is not super crazy about sales, to be able to, in the sense that I'm trying to, write grants and raise money for this organization that then immediately gets flipped into scholarships for these children that may not have otherwise had a chance to go to college,
Hmm.
is pretty easy. Like it's just not hard work. I think that's the thing that has shocked me the most. And it's not hard for me to get motivated when I wake up in the morning. Okay, I got my to-do list and I just dive into it, and it's pretty cool right now.
They have me for a volunteer for life for sure, because it's just really cool. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yep.
And so many of the no grader, if you think about the timing, this makes sense, but so many of the kids that are going through boot camp with no greater sacrifice, boot camp is what you guys call your summer orientation. I don't want to confuse that with actual boot camp, but they lost a parent when they were 1, 2, 3 years old. So it's interesting in that it's something that's always there. It's always part of their life, but it's a person that maybe they just didn't really know really well.
And the thing that I think I respect so much about this organization that was not founded by me, I'm just jumping into it now, is that these kids that we're accepting into the scholarship program, we're not necessarily looking at the highest SAT scores and GPAs and like the things that you normally think of for scholarships, but we're accepting them based on the sacrifice that their service member has made. Were in the line of duty, that they were severely injured, more than 70% typically when on a VA rating, lots of amputees, traumatic brain injuries, PTSD, and that kind of thing. And like you said, a lot of trauma that the families have gone through. In the case of the severely wounded, some of these kids, some of these young adults really have been caregivers for their families, right? And that
Hmm.
has directly taken away from the time that they would otherwise be able to spend on their schoolwork and on college or working after school to be able to raise money for college. And so to be able to take the stress away of how they're going to pay for college and be able to
Hmm.
empower them to just look forward, not look back, not sit in their trauma, right? Their trauma is very real, but we don't want them to sit there and to stay there and have that as an excuse. It's that informs their future. It gives them context, but look forward and achieve
Hmm.
something with your life because we've been able to provide the resources. And for all of these families, maybe younger enlisted, hadn't had the experience of the process of applying to school, we'll
Sure.
help them with that process. We'll help them get into school. And then once they're there, you know what? Maybe they're not the best student. Maybe they've got learning disabilities or they're on the spectrum or they've got another disability. That's not a disqualifier. That's an enabler. That's their superpower. And we help them tap into that by the
Hmm.
coaching that we provide them, especially primarily Boston, who is close to their age, and he can just prop them up, give them not only coaching techniques, but also we work with them to get connected to the services that are in the school. We provide tutoring for them. You know what I mean? And it quite literally changes lives. These aren't the high achieving kids that would achieve no matter what. These are the kids that do need a little bit more
Sure.
of a community approach to be able
Hmm.
to continue to move upward and onward.
Sure.
And it's such an honor to be able to just really reach out to these families that have sacrificed a lot and just turn it around for them.
Yep. If not necessarily the top of the academic achievements, the kids I've met over the last 2 summers, they're pretty amazing, really
Yeah.
squared away, especially because they'll invite back kids that are partway through college, 2 or 3 years through college, to come back and be a student leader during the summer
Oh,
orientation and just really mature and polite and polished and It's a broad spectrum of people of different backgrounds, but it just seems they respond really well to the services that you provide, and it's really super impressive.
Yeah, thank you for that observation. And we we're pretty introspective and self-critical about our processes. We're always trying to move forward because we have kids from all over the spectrum of abilities and communication wise. There are some kids that sometimes fall off our communications, right? Like we reach out to them. Once you apply for the scholarship and you get accepted, you don't have to reapply every year, but you do have to send in a request for funds so that we know what it is that you need each semester after the other benefits maybe pay in.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and I recognize this with my own kids, sometimes their own anxieties get in the way, their own life. And so we're still figuring out how we can meet them where they are. And you're right in that we do try to select the families based on their sacrifice, as well as the kids who show the most promise. But, you know, like anything else, when they're writing an essay and they have their application package, it's paper until you actually meet them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really very cool and such an honor to get to know some of these kids that despite their circumstances, despite the trauma that the family's been through, for them to be able to just have that prop them up and move them forward is really big. And also to get to gain a community through this experience, right? Like through boot camp and through some other activities. We have like scholar hangout for the different scholars who are going to schools in the DC area, for example, or interacting with other young adults who have been through similar trauma as them and they get it. They get it.
Yep. So obviously you're going to be staying with this job for the long term.
Yeah, I think so. I double dipped for a couple weeks in May. I wanted to finish out my 20 years exactly with my contracting company because I love them so much and they have done so much for me. My first day of work in May was the board meeting when we selected our current cohort of scholars.
Mm-hmm.
That was the middle of May, so I'm just a couple months into the job.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, 2005 to 2007, honestly, I'm updating our donor report right now. And I've been doing a lot of research just on the number of casualties and things like that and digging into databases and stuff. And so the number of casualties of our servicemen between 2005 to 2007 in the war on terrorism after 2001, it was more those 3 years than any other 3-year stretch. And those kids are all college age now. Yeah. So there's an incredible need the next couple of years. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens after that because the demographic is going to change a little bit just based on how we as a country have changed our footprint in combat zones. I think I told you Bonnie Sutherland, who's a member of Greater Sacrifice. Her husband, Colonel Dave Sutherland, commanded a unit in Iraq during that time. I want to say 2006 to 2007. He lost 110 soldiers that Bonnie had to go visit every single one of those spouses. He just had his third open heart surgery. He is a badass in his own right. The time between 2006 to 2007, every single one of those losses, he still feels. And frankly, he's part of the origin story of No Greater Sacrifice, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's another whole long story about how there were a group of people that were just like, you know what, we need to do better. We need to provide. At the time, there wasn't really a Fry scholarship. There wasn't, the GI Bill was just different, right? And there wasn't the ability to be able to, there weren't NGOs at the time that were making it possible for the children of these service members to be able to move beyond their usually couple women, but like usually it was the dads beyond their sacrifice, right? It's just about survival after that. And so to be able to give them an opportunity to realize the dreams that they have through either and it could be a degree, it could be an electrician certificate or a welding certificate. Like it doesn't have to be
College,
whatever
yeah.
they're doing. There's some of our scholars that started college and then they're like, you know what, I'm gonna enlist, or they were, but it just gets them out of their current situation and moves them forward.
Yep.
Really amazing.
So, Missy, this is crazy. So, Bonnie, this fellow board member that Amy is talking about,
Yeah.
she lives about 4 houses away from me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
but I didn't know her beforehand.
Really?
And the first time I volunteered, she's, oh yeah, I live in Alexandria. And I'm like, oh, I do too.
Literally right
So-
around the corner. She's a board member, but she is like, she approves every single scholarship, every single funds in every semester. She does so much work for us. She really does. Like, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. That's
Well,
awesome.
speaking of the connection, if ourselves or our spouses were active duty during that time, and we all know someone connected in a way. I see that Ginger is friends with my friend Lindsay, who lost her husband Jeremy in 2005. And they're friends. And there is a very fraternity or sorority of sorts of spouses who have lost their loved ones that way. And then my friend Elaine lost her husband Jim in a training accident. And I met her after she was remarried, but just through both Lindsay and Elaine's stories, we all know someone that's been affected.
Oh, totally. And that was one of the things. There's a grief share typically at a lot of churches.
Oh yeah.
That is, the aperture is open in grief share to if you've lost a parent or a sibling or, you know, and there is something very specific about being a widow. And like Ginger has said, or some of the other gals that I've met through that ministry have said, the club you never want to join.
Right.
But it's the only club that really gets you, right? And
exactly.
In fact, there's a gal that has shown up. She was Ginger's realtor in Nashville. Her name's Whitney. She's shown up the last couple of years to the widows conferences that Never Alone Widows has held in various places. She just tragically lost her husband 3 days ago.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
So how has God been preparing her for this is probably introducing her to this ministry and then all the, right? Like it's, you don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
But you want to create the support once you have it, because there's no better empathy than from those who get it.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad passed away in his 50s, and my mom wasn't like a 20-something newlywed when she lost my dad, but she always said that the fact that she had been a Navy wife who was used to being able to make decisions and move the family around and figure out things without my dad, that training really helped her get through those first couple of years of being a widow.
Yeah. There is something in the culture of being a military spouse that is just, again, back to the lesson I learned about just showing up. Isn't that kind of what the military does anyway? You PCS and you just off at somebody's house that you've never ever met before, but they know someone that knows somebody, and just trust them. You've got stuff.
I was just going to say, so I work in funeral services, and it all started because when we were stationed in Germany, my friend Donna lost her son in an automobile accident, and they were in our squadron, and the guys were deployed. Her husband was not, because he was a contractor, but my husband was deployed with the squadron commander. And so Chris calls me and says, hey, I just want you to be aware that this has happened, because I'm with the colonel and he was the first to know, or they contacted him. And so he says, because Donna's husband was a contractor, do you think you could reach out to her? And I said, it's the same thing. You were like, I don't know what to say or whatever. And we were pretty good friends because we went to German class together, and my son had surgery during the deployment, and Donna and her husband helped me. And anyways, so I just called her and I just said, Donna, this is Missy. And we just both cried. We just sat on the phone and cried. And to this day, she and I are still very close. Being that person, like Donna's only person. Like some people stepped up, but I just decided like I was going to be there for her. She taught me so much about grief and about it's not about saying the right things. Like you said, it's just about showing up. And there were days she would just be, you want to come cry with me? And I'd go over there and cry. I helped her sort through her son's stuff. But it led me down this career path through walking through grief with many people. And I tell people this when they say to me at work, I don't know how to help them. I say, call her in weeks, call her in a month, check in with her regularly because in the flurry of loss, everyone shows up, right? We all show up. We have a casserole. We watch the kids. We do whatever. But then there comes this time, and it's just human nature. We all go back to our ways. And so that's my best advice in cases like that. It's like showing up again. It's remembering the day that their loved one passed away. It's remembering their anniversary, their birthdays, and just reaching out to that friend and just saying, hey, I remember, because I think a lot of people forget, but they never forget. So
no, and that is very important, right? Because we, you know, at the beginning, and it's a little weird in that it's partially, it should be all about that person who suffered the loss, but partially it's about you too, right? Like you feel to do something, and you have to tap into what would be most useful to that person, and it's not asking them what they want you to do. It literally is just doing it because, like, my friend Ginger couldn't put punctuation in capital letters in text for months. She couldn't eat. She went down to 90 pounds, right? Just it went like the day to day, and she needed people. It was again like all the lessons that I learned that have been since applied. I don't know if until that moment I had a close friend who lost somebody, but I've since been able to apply these lessons, like Missy, you're saying, so many other situations, right? Where it really isn't that helpful to say, to expect the person that is walking around in a fog, unable to care for themselves or their kids, to ask them what they need. You figure it out. You just need to show up, and it's going to become obvious what needs to be done with Ginger. And I'm sure you've seen these things. She had her church community show up. She had those of us that were from afar just fly in, and we had a schedule. By the time I got there, they lived in a teeny little house. They weren't expecting twins, but they did have twins. They were 9 months old. And Ginger picked me up at the airport. This was January, and Troy was killed in November. And oh, I forgot to tell you, we're moving this week. And so then I helped to organize the move. I wouldn't even have my email on in the morning. The doorbell would ring. It would be ladies from the church that were there ready to help just pack up. And then a day later, I had this terrible sore throat. I had strep. And I went to the doctor. I took her car. I went to the doctor. I got some medication, and God healed me in like a nanosecond. Seriously, like we did not have time to be sick that week.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, seriously, the urge to do something is so human, but the obviousness of what you do is really not that intuitive until you just show up. Then everybody fits into their roles, right? Like the bossy pants among us are like, you start doing this. And then you see also the second, third, fourth order effects, right? Like, I was helping to put together the ceremony at Arlington, the first of 3, actually, for our friends. But the trickle down effects of that, my mom came down to help with the kids. She brought some family, and my friends like Elizabeth and Allison and Trisha and like the other, right? I was in a Bible study at this huge mega church at the time, and I went up and I spoke, and I'm like, look, I don't even know what I need. And people just started showing up to my house with food, and some of it we used for the funeral, and some of the women that I had never even met before were like, you know what, you need to eat, you need to feed your family too, right? I mean, so it brings out, not always, but it can bring out the absolute best in humanity, and it is so reaffirming. And in my personal, just an adventure journey through this whole thing, I never knew at the moment how it would lead me to dealing with other situations in a much more informed way. And now I am just so thrilled to have this job where I'm helping these kids, and I never would have ended up here had we not lost our friend Troy 18 years ago. And I still can't believe it was 18 years ago. And here I
Wow.
am on the airport on my way to help Ginger again
Move.
because she's missing. And I'm like, I would FOMO too hard if I would not be there to help her unpack these boxes.
Yeah,
Are we ready for our questions?
we're endeavoring to be a tad more focused, and which you probably can't tell yet.
It's us. It's not you, Amy, or any of our
Correct.
viewers. It's
Correct.
totally
That
a
was
Missy and Elizabeth problem.
Yeah, exactly.
but I'm very loquacious myself, as my husband would.
Yeah,
He's
so
like,
we have new and improved season 3 questions for our guests, and so these are going to be questions that we ask every guest for season 3. So here we go. Do you want to ask the first one, Missy?
I will ask the first one, Elizabeth. What would be the title of the book about your life? I love this question.
Okay, so I thought about this, and then I talked with Pat, and frankly, that's my husband. Frankly, I get his response out of my head, and I feel like it's mine too. So here's my title, quote, "So that just happened."
I love it. Perfect. That's perfect.
So many circumstances fit that exactly. So that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. You want to keep going, Missy?
Yes, we're gonna skipping the next one and going on to our other one, which is totally fine, Amy. If your house is on fire and all humans and pets are safe and accounted for, what is one thing you would grab to rescue?
I put a lot of thought into this too, and I concluded it would be the Christmas stockings that my mom has knitted for us.
Oh,
So when my sister and I were really little, my mom knitted these adorable Christmas stockings. And then, 27 years later, I married Pat. She knitted for the first time in probably 20 some years. She knitted him a Christmas stocking, but it lost a little bit of her knitting mojo. So that Christmas stocking that was supposed to be like normal stocking length ended up being literally like the length of your entire leg. And it's
oh my goodness.
because it's literally like from the mantle probably grazes the heart, right? And then she pulled it back with our 2 boys and she knitted them the Christmas stockings too. But I think that I was thinking of the things that I have that have a lot of work to them. That's just stuff that can be replaced.
Yeah.
Something like that has a story and that someone made, you can't replace that. And my mom is so stinking sweet, and just the stories that every Christmas kind of are associated with what she poured her love into making for us just can't ever be replaced. So I would grab, may not be one thing, but it's a category, one category, but the 4 Christmas stuff.
Yeah.
I like it.
And isn't that lovely that his mother-in-law, which oftentimes in-law relationships can be fractious, but his mother-in-law knitted the biggest stocking for him.
We
Don't
can
get it
tell who the favorite is.
They love Pat Rather more than me. So that is not.
My mom too. She loves my husband more. Hi, Mom.
Yeah.
My grandmother knitted our Christmas stockings too. That would be on my short list of things. Yeah.
I know. We came up with the questions, but I haven't done the hard thinking to figure out what my answer would be. I don't know yet.
We'll ask you at the end of the season, Elizabeth. We'll go over these questions, you and I. Yeah.
Yep.
Moving on. Oh, I think this one's going to be very apparent, but we'll act surprised. What organization do you support that you would like to share with our listeners?
Well, okay. So obviously, No Greater Sacrifice, because that's who I work with now. But I've also gained such a heart for Never Alone Widows because of their role that they play, I think, in the healing journey. And because I've been honored to, I don't want to brag, but my friend Amy and I sell merch at their conferences. And I just really have gotten an insight into that whole world that I hope I don't have to actually live myself. But
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's an amazing organization. Yeah.
You obviously have educated me on both of these. Definitely going to follow them and keep up with their mission.
Awesome.
And hopefully our listeners do too. Hey, we have some awesome listeners. So we've
Yeah.
We do.
generated some buzz for some great organizations.
Dozens and dozens.
Dozens. Growing every day.
Growing every day. Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
And then what friend do you have with an interesting story to share who we should interview?
I actually think that you should call my friend Allison Brown. Elizabeth, it's been a long time, but I think you remember meeting her, right?
I do remember meeting her. We're Facebook friends, but we haven't had an in-person meeting in a long time.
Not a long time. So she's another Air Force wife. She has 3 kids. Her oldest, Ayla, just graduated from Georgetown.
Oh my God. She graduated already?
Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
Aspen is in high school. Liam and Declan are autistic, and Allison there is no woman I can think of who has moved heaven and earth more forcefully for her kids, get them all the support that they need, but yet they don't treat their boys in any way that is different, right?
Hmm?
Meet their kids where they are. And she's testified to Congress on special needs in the military. She's a computer science engineer, but was a stay-at-home mom. Allison works now for a nonprofit called React DC, which has been resettling. It started out as Afghan refugees. I'm not sure if they still have that focus, but she's like their director of programs. I think she's very entertaining.
Thank you so very much for your time, Amy.
I love to tell stories. So this is fun. I've never done anything like this. So thank you for inviting me. Very honored.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that I've heard about you for years.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Amy. Elizabeth. She brings together the best people.
Oh, she does.
Yes. That's how I make myself better, is I just hang around with better people.
Wait, that's what I've been doing for 20 years. So,
Oh, goodness.
All right, ladies, have a good night.
So, Missy, what did you think about meeting my friend Amy?
what I think about all your friends. There's no, you have some very talented, smart, highly educated, highly driven friends. And so
Oh, I'm
Amy
just
fits all of
lucky.
those. I wonder why you all include me, because I don't fit any of those things, but her work with no greater sacrifice is admirable. And it comes from personal experience and the compassion that she's had for people who have lost loved ones. And I think she's the right person to be there.
Absolutely.
And she's going to help lots of families for many years.
It makes me happy to see her so fired up and motivated by this work.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of people, I try to tell my kids when they're maybe searching for a job and it's not easy to come, I always say, go and volunteer someplace. Because you
Right.
never know, that may turn into a paid gig or it may lead to something else.
Yep.
And to just always go out there. And that's what she did. This was something that she had a connection to and she felt very strong about. And then, I mean, I'm sure at the end of the day, she was still going to do it, whether she got paid or not. But
Oh, absolutely.
they're lucky to have her. Did you learn anything about her that you didn't know before?
I had never met Troy and Ginger, but I guess I had known about them. And I didn't know all the nitty-gritty details of Troy's accident. But I certainly heard the aftermath from Amy's perspective. And I just really appreciated how she said just being there for a person, even if you don't know what you could possibly add to the situation, or if you're even capable based on your own shock to provide support. Because that's how I feel about Amy. I feel if you called and said, "Oh my God, my life's falling apart," she'd be there in 2 minutes.
Right.
When I was deployed for a year, she and our other friend Kathleen were over at our house here in Virginia, and they decided that the kitchen needed to be reorganized and out-of-date stuff needed to be gotten rid of. And so they just did it because clearly Greg had his hands full in the Air Force, and he's trying to take care of our kids, and he's making sure they're at least fed 3 times a day. I remember Amy emailing me, and she's just so you know, Kathleen and I decided that your kitchen needed to be fixed up, and so we reorganized for Greg. And I'm like, okay, cool, but that's what needed to get done.
I have always tried to be that person that responds to people. I've learned that it's not about doing the right things or saying the right things. It's just about your presence. Sometimes you feel inadequate, but later you find out, oh, okay, they really valued that. And I've been in some times where we've been in crisis. Obviously, nothing like Ginger's situation, but I have never forgotten the people that show up.
Yep.
And working in funeral services, I see it a lot. And I also tell people that sometimes they're like, I don't know what to do right now. Everything's in chaos and there's a lot of people around. And there is always an opportunity later to come along and say, I wasn't able to help you at the beginning, but I just want you to know I'm here. And just being honest with people and saying, I don't know what to do, but I'm here. Tell me what to do. I always try to think of concrete things to do. And you never forget those people who show up on your worst day.
And I know there have been times when I've had friends in crisis and I just haven't either been able to get there, or I had something going on in my own life. And so there's definitely times where I'm like, oh man, I just did not handle that. I did not judge that well.
Oh yeah.
But hopefully it's an average of my whole life.
Yeah, no, I had a situation like that. I had a friend and she was going through cancer treatment, but I had a newborn. My husband was deployed, or maybe I had two and I was pregnant and Chris was deployed. Anyways, I just remember saying to her, I was a horrible friend that year. I was barely keeping my head above water. I am so sorry. Please forgive me. And if you don't, that's fine too. You're probably better off without me. And she was honest and she was gracious and she thanked me for that. And because she said not a lot of people did show up for her. And just knowing that I acknowledged that, it healed some part of our friendship. But yeah, there's no perfect way to help anybody. But Amy is one of those people, she shows up in a big way. I don't know if I would ever walk into a friend's house and think, oh, I'm going to rearrange her kitchen. But how helpful that would be right now. I need an Amy. She can come and work on my kitchen and pantry.
Yep.
But I know when we moved to Washington State, my friend Marissa, she showed up with a carrot cake and a bottle of wine, which are two of my favorite things. And I cried when I opened the door. I don't know, just seeing her there standing with two of my favorite things because she knows me so well. And she did such concrete things. And what I loved about her is she didn't need a lot of guidance. She was like, okay, let's get your kitchen in order. So she helped me with that. And then she had her daughter put all my shoes away because that was a very easy thing to do. And so I'm a big fan of people who find very concrete ways to help someone.
Find us at facebook.com/YSMMF podcast and Instagram at YSMMF podcast for episode announcements. Thanks.